And now we're going to hear from business leaders representing two highly visible and competitive sectors, beauty and confectionery, or candy, if you like. My next guests know all about market access and competition. Josh Ghaim is CEO of Small World Brands, super cool network of products that you have helped launch, and I'm looking forward to getting into all that. He's also the founder and managing partner of Ignite Venture Studio, a new brand and innovation accelerator in the health and beauty market. Prior to this, he spent 15 years at Johnson & Johnson holding several roles that helped him get familiar with markets across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And Karen Horan, Vice President of Global Business Development with the National Confectioners Association, she has the best backdrop of the day. There's a thing called Rate Your Room that they're doing on Skype and whatnot. You get a little thing back saying Rate Your Room, and you get a 20 out of 10, definitely. Every year, members of the association export nearly $2 billion worth of American-made chocolates and confectionery around the world. I should say I had a talk with Karen the other day, and she said, you know, we only export $2 billion. That's kind of a small number. To me, it's a big number, and I find it fascinating. So thank you both. Josh, let me just start with you for a moment. And your backdrop's not bad either, but you know, it's very hard to I hope you can see the candy room behind Karen, because it's pretty impressive. But Josh, I'm interested as you kind of look at the scene we're in today, and you've helped launch so many brands around the world. And again, we're not doing this just for what's already happened, but we're trying to put this out for people who would like to have a playbook on how to begin thinking about following in your footsteps and taking some of their brands out there. Is it a healthy time to do that, or is this a dismal time?
Yeah, it's actually, first of all, thank you for having me. And what we're finding is this is actually a perfect time for entrepreneurs to push more global presence. To give you an idea, we launched a beauty brand last year. When we started to see the effects of COVID, we actually accelerated, instead of slowing down, we accelerated our expansion into China. We collaborated with Alibaba, with Tmall Global, and maybe we had a little bit of an advantage because I spent the last 20 years between Colgate-Palmolive, Pfizer, and J&J. We knew the relationships, what needs to happen in China. So we felt that the good way to balance what's happening in the US is actually to launch in China. And we knew the cycle was a little bit off in a sense that COVID, they were recovering from COVID perspective, and Chinese consumers are very loyal to certain brands, especially American brands. So all of that, I think it enabled us to basically push more. So for me, I think right now, my recommendation to most startups is think globally. Because of the digital marketplaces, I think several of your speakers actually highlighted that. Right. It's actually the best time to expand.
Let me ask you another question before I jump to Karen. But you know, oftentimes when we think about countries like this, and again, I was discussing Japan with Congressman Larson and others, there used to be, it seemed to be a much heavier, bigger hill to climb on culture and language gaps and misunderstandings. Have digital marketplaces somehow brought that hill down a bit? I mean, what's the state of the speed bumps and the barriers when it comes to dealing in a culture that, you know, my relatives in Kansas and Oklahoma wouldn't have the foggiest idea of what to do in Tianjin?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think that you bring up, whether it's Japan, China, and other places, social media is changing everything. I can tell you that here in the US, we work with editors and others when we're launching new products. We highlight something in the US, we get orders from China, Hong Kong, Japan, people asking because they read something that happened in the US because of Facebook, Instagram, everything else you can think of socially from a social media perspective. So this is a trend we continue to see, but speed matters in all of this. I think it's important that people understand information is getting from US to Japan, from Japan to US or China or Korea at a much faster pace than what we're used to. And this is actually enabling those speed bumps that you mentioned are becoming easier. And I think you heard from the president of Alibaba, that was a good example in the sense that working with Tmall Global, it almost takes a lot of those hurdles that exist away to some extent. Yes, I think you can actually look for people that can help you here in the US, but Tmall Global, Alibaba, Amazon and others are opening up the window quite a bit so that you're able to get listed on Amazon here, but be available in Australia and a lot of other markets very quickly. So those speed bumps are definitely getting lower and lower every single day.
Fascinating. Karen, There you are.
And
Hi. So good to see you again. I'm going to acknowledge to the audience that we had dinner a few months ago, and I became fascinated with the story and the world you're in of confectioners because, there are a lot of confectionery operations. Many of them are small, mom and pop, family-owned situations that don't have size, but they have brands that I know. But the global export scene is beginning to matter for more of them. So you and I talked about almond roca. Can I hear the almond roca story? Can we share that with our audience?
absolutely. Yes, almond roca. And I just wanted to iterate also that, yes, many of our members, while we have many large multinational companies, 2/3 of our membership are small to medium-sized companies that are family-owned, multi-generational companies. So just like almond roca, and it's right outside Congressman Larson's territory, Brown and Haley, who represents almond roca, or that's their brand, they started out like in the early 1900s with their product. And what's really impressive with almond roca and Brown and Haley is that 1/3 of their business is exports. So for a small company, that's very, very impressive. But Asia is an area of interest for them, and it comes by it naturally because they have taken into account the packaging that they have. They've incorporated, it comes in a pink tin. They've added red to it because red represents wealth, and as well as they have gifting, a lot of the gifting for the gold in the packaging and the wrap that the product is. So, they really have expanded into this market, given the fact that they took a strategic look at this, and they represent this and really, really focus on Chinese New Year, the 11/11 date that Alibaba represents as well in China.
Right.
So they're a really good company that's small, but they have a huge business in the Asian marketplace.
Let me also ask you, Karen, about what U.S. government services, support networks, if any, exist. I mean, I'd love to just hear and convey to those out there listening to this where they might look to for support if they've never gone this route before. And I know you've talked a little bit about agriculture and some of these internationally lean-in programs.
Right. So, confectionery products, you think of confectionery as a packaged good, but they have a tremendous number of agricultural content within the products. So when you think about dairy and the nuts and, fruit and things such as that, all of that goes into our products. So yes, we have access to some other forms of market access through USDA. There are also programs through the Department of Commerce that also help with this market access to get into these markets, as well as in the United States to bring buyers to the United States to help facilitate business in their own countries. So yeah, there are some great opportunities out there for companies to participate in, especially on the small.
And you think they're doing their job well?
I do. I think it's valuable for these companies, especially these small companies, to gain access to this, to get into these markets. Because again, they're getting in there through trade shows, through meeting with buyers, and just total collaboration. Absolutely, I think it's very valuable.
Well, fascinating. And I just keep looking at the candy behind you and getting distracted. So, Josh, let me ask you a question. Josh, let me ask you a question about brands and culture. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but I sort of want to ask you about the power, if there is still a power in American culture, in the sense of it in the world today, or whether you're worried about it. I interviewed about 30 years ago, believe it or not, the CEO of Shiseido. And I asked Shiseido, how did the cosmetics industry in Japan get to be such a big deal, where you saw large department stores with huge cosmetics areas, that were there. And he said Audrey Hepburn and Roman Holiday. And so this was an Audrey Hepburn movie, Roman Holiday, somehow, I don't know, because I'm not a pop culture expert, that somehow transformed the aspirations of Japanese women in particular in a very different way in the cosmetics issue and the kind of branding opportunities that came in there. But that was the power at one point of American culture. Is that still there? Does that still matter? Are there bank shots still possible with that? Or does brand penetration and brand excellence have to take other routes today?
Yeah, I think that's what it used to be. I don't think that exists as much as it used to. I think digital has equalized a lot of things, which means that influencers, key opinion leaders are actually influencing a lot of things that people are buying today. Believe it or not, in the US, influencers, whether it's actors, actresses, just people that are into health and wellness, people that do training, all of those people are big influencers because of Instagram, Facebook, in terms of the following they have. I mean, you'll see people that have 50 million followers. And in this day and age, it's not TV advertising. It's actually getting the right influencers that believe in a brand, that truly support the brand, getting those collaborations. And they range from people that have 5,000 followers all the way to 50 million followers. But this is a global phenomenon. You will see influencers that are based in the US that could influence Chinese consumers, Japanese consumers. And once in a while, we see the reverse, which is people that are famous because they've done something in China actually become influencers here in the US, especially to millennials and Gen Z. They tend to pay a lot of attention to that. So I think that process still exists in terms of this iconic way to introduce certain brands, but that group of people is much broader today than it used to be because it's just hundreds and hundreds of influencers that are playing a significant role in introducing brands. And that's part of the reason we're seeing this in the beauty cosmetic space. But believe it or not, we're seeing the same thing in the digital health space. I mean, think about what's happening. COVID is accelerating things, whether it's direct to consumer, probably in the US, 5-10 years. I think those are things that we're seeing today are things that we were expecting to happen 5 years from now. The same thing on the digital health space, which is getting access to physicians through telemedicine because of technology is just changing everything. So it's not just on the beauty cosmetics, but we're seeing the same effect on the digital health. And I think it's only going to be better as we move forward and as people get comfortable with it.
Fascinating. Let me ask you a similar kind of thing, Karen. When you look at your providers, your manufacturers and inventors, if you will, innovators of confectionery products in the United States, and you've talked a little bit about the government side, we've been talking about digital marketplaces. If you were to sort of improve the prospects for global opportunities for these firms, as I know this is your job, what are the kinds of steps that everybody needs to take to make that better, to kind of enhance and build, beyond that $2 billion? What are the kinds of orientations we should have that aren't happening as naturally as they are now, but could be made better?
Well, I think that, the way that we try and help at NCA and my role is to help influence to build like distributorship access for their companies, as well as trade missions, bringing them together. Because let's be honest, I mean, candy brings people together no matter where you are in the world, right? It brings happiness. So, I think that around the globe, people are very, they love American products. We're looked at to be safe products as well. So people are attracted to the products that we have. But 96% of the consumers are outside of the United States. So there's a big opportunity for us to grow and to make give our members access to products around the world.
Let me just ask you both finally, when we look at the global scene and the digital marketplaces, are you optimistic that this will remain robust and because we just do see a shaky world, a world where trust isn't where they are. And when I kind of go and I think about some of the businesses that I know, like the ones I was discussing from GoDaddy and others, they're filled with optimism. But I'm just wondering, since you're both sitting at a slightly higher ladder point, Are you optimistic about how things are, that we'll get through these tough times? Or do you think we need to take what's seriously and kind of do specific steps to rebuild that trust? Josh?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic. I think it's interesting that I left J&J about a year ago, and the whole goal when I left was actually to start this venture studio to help those brands become global. But everything we've been building has been to do direct to consumer first. E-commerce, you have to live into that first before you look at retail and everything else. And I think what we're seeing is that being accelerated, which means that I think we're very optimistic. It doesn't take away from what's going to happen in retail, but I think what we're seeing because of COVID, I'm very optimistic. Granted, I wish there is more help from governments and others that are just constantly putting hurdles into the process, basically.
And Karen, I'm going to give you the last word, in the candy room as we're talking, Are you optimistic? I mean, this sounds like a setup because maybe I'm usually so cynical I need a little bit of optimism around me. But Karen?
Absolutely. I think that, there are so many opportunities out there, especially with, everything going digital. They're jumping on this. They're doing more of this. They have no other choice than to create this digital platform. If they hadn't already, they're doing it now. And it's happening on both sides. It's not just happening with the manufacturers, but it's happening on the buyer side as well. So here at NCA, we've had, several gatherings digitally with not only manufacturers, but with buyers as well. And the conversation is just continuing, this could be the way of business for the inevitable future. There are kinks that we have to work out because we are a product of a food product in general. So yeah, I think that companies have to be able to do this, and I feel very optimistic that we will succeed in this for sure.
I really loved this conversation with the two of you, and really want to go hang out with you, Karen. Great. Josh Ghaim of Small World Brands and Ignite Venture Studio, Karen Horan of the National Confectioners Association. Thank you both for sharing with us kind of what the terrain is right now for the businesses you're dealing with on the global scene, and I really appreciate your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our program today. A big thank you to the Alibaba Group for their support and all of you attendees for joining us for this very important discussion. For those of you who missed any of the conversations this afternoon, we're going to have this video up from the event on our website shortly. I'm Steve Clemons. Be safe, be well.